Hey friends, Mayflom here. Today we're talking about resin tape. So I got really curious, how is everybody doing their resin charms, their open items without having a mold? And I went online, I did some searches, came up with this product, which is called resin tape. And I'll put a link in the video description. And basically it's tape. And no, you cannot just sub in any tape. It is important to have this specific tape. You place your item, whatever your item is, down onto it, then fill it with resin. And then when the resin is cured, pull it off the tape and you're good to go. Sounds super simple, and honestly, it is. Now for this project, I'm using UV resin. I really like this particular one, the PDB Studios, I believe. Again, I'll link in the video description. And the thing about UV resin is that it has to be a small amount, number one. Number two, it's more expensive than the epoxy resin typically. Number three, though, it's curing almost instantly. Now, normally with the epoxy resin, I do put gloves on. I'm not in this one, to be honest. I mean, I know I wasn't going to touch any and I don't have to mix anything. I'm just using a paintbrush to kind of move the resin around and get it to flatten out there. And then I'm putting some alcohol ink on the resin. As you can see, it does cool things. That's just one drop in one color, and look what that does. I'm adding a second drop of color, and I'll use that paintbrush. That's just an old paintbrush that I had there to kind of stir around and move around the color and the resin. And if there's any that needs to come off, I'll get that off. But this is just a very thin layer of resin and some color. Now, you don't have to use alcohol ink. You could just keep it clear. You could put items in there if you wanted items in there. Once you're satisfied, though, with the first layer, and remember, first layer, thin layer, what I just showed you there is a UV light. I bought mine at Michael's. It was very inexpensive. There's a lot of options, but UV resin, you really do have to have the UV light. Please do not believe there are some that theoretically you can take out in the sunshine, and after a certain amount of time of direct sunshine, guess what, guys? Just get the under $10 tool that you need and use that, okay? So now I'm doing another layer. Now you can do as many layers as you want. You can do as few layers as you want. The thing with the UV resin is thin layers, at least in my experience. If you want it to cure properly and you don't want to get bubbles or weird, like trapped weirdness, do a thin layer, repeat with the lamp, usually 1 minute, although I kind of take a look. Sometimes it needs 2 or 3 minutes. It just depends on the brand of UV resin. It depends on a lot of things. Now I just put a little dot into that star and I'm just kind of letting the UV resin move around in there. I'm going to add some glitter into that star and then seal it up with more UV resin after that's done. So I think you're getting the hint here. This is a really easy project. If you utilize really thin layers with the UV resin, and as you can see here, I'm picking up some glitter, and I actually am picking up a tiny bit of UV resin on the paintbrush and then just kind of spreading it onto the surface to add some glitter in there. And then I'm just trying different methods to get some glitter off the edges. I was concerned about the glitter not sticking to the edges of the metal, but I got to tell you, this whole thing, it really doesn't have to happen that way. I didn't need to be worried. Main takeaways are going to be, number one, wear gloves, work next to an open window. I know sometimes you see me without gloves, and I really should always have gloves on. I just don't always. That's my personal choice. But do as I say, not as I do. And I'm just continuing to spread thin layers of the UV resin. Number two, at least in my experience so far, the UV resin wants thin layers. Think of it like layers of nail polish or paint. If we tried to put paint on the wall and we tried to put a 1/4 inch thick layer of paint on the wall, it would run down. It would be terrible. I think of it like that. We want thin layers. So I'm just continuing to dome up and make fantastic my layers here. Now the resin tape, the reason it has to be resin tape is the UV lamp, possibly heating if you had bubbles and you needed to use a heat tool to pop the bubbles. There's a lot of different things that can go on with resin work that could require heat. So, and of course the chemicals of resin. So using the resin specific tape is definitely a must. The thing I'm loving about this is I can take charms, I can take pendants, I can take all kinds of things and now fill them with color and design and resin and get into a very cool project. Here you can see once I'm done layering, I've taken it off of the tape and it just peels off as you would expect. So you can see the difference here when it's on a white background, when it's got a blue background, it looks different depending on the background, but it is clear and everything dried, cured beautifully. And now I can make whatever I would like with this. You see how the back has not quite as shiny. If you wanted the back to be shinier, you could just repeat, dome another layer. I hope this video was helpful to you. Let me know what future tutorials you'd like to see. Always love hearing from you. I'll see you next time.